Okay, we're going to get started after all the hugging is done. Welcome to Adult Ed. Today we have Lighthouse Immigration Advocates, Director of Advancement, David Lee. He's going to share with us their mission and the work that they've been doing. David is driven to build a community that grows more just, equitable, and open to opportunity, which can best foster others who are living within the uniquely multicultural experiment that is the United States. Born in South Korea, David immigrated with his family to New Jersey in 1992, while his father earned a master's in divinity at New Brunswick Theological Seminary. Growing up in New Jersey, interestingly enough, his home was located between an RCA church and the city's largest Jewish temple. Graduating from Hope College in 2008, David went on to earn a Master's of Music from Northern Illinois University before returning to live and work in Holland at the Community Action House for nearly 7 years. David joined the Lighthouse Immigration Advocates family in the summer of 2021. He brings deep experiences in volunteer management, fundraising, marketing, product management, data analysis, and a lifelong learner's curiosity to best support the funding and community building efforts of Lighthouse Immigration Advocates. In his previous lives, he served as both a youth orchestra conductor, violinist, and chamber musician. I'm curious how those have helped you in your current position. Hope Church, we have a special connection through our Afghan refugees and and a Lighthouse has been instrumental in helping her just recently get her green card and are helping her move on in her new home in Holland, Michigan. So we're greatly appreciative. I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, I want to mention one other thing. You should ask David how it went when he took his wife to meet her relatives in Korea over the Christmas break.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. If at any time I start mumbling like this, because I do this a lot, please just yell at me and tell me, because I tend to speak a little bit lower. I'm so thankful to have the chance to speak with you and connect with you this morning. I think it was about 2 years ago that I did a similar presentation, but it was all over Zoom, so maybe I saw some of your faces in those little tiny boxes, and this is much my preference. So thanks for having me back. I have a slides and presentations and things. They asked me to say some things. One is that this is being recorded and that there is also an audience online. So welcome to all of you as well, and that the recording will be made available after the fact at some point, some kind of secret handshake or password that you need to, okay, recite this, okay. Questions and comments, this is really small text, but on the sheets of paper, the handouts, there's also our contact information. So after this talk or at any time in the next couple weeks, months, days, whatever it is, please feel welcome to reach out to us, whether it's just to connect further or learn more about immigration or offer up some helpful ideas about how we do our work. We are always here to help our community together. So before I go super deep into Lighthouse Immigrant Advocates, I want to say also thank you to Bob. He's been such a wonderful person to be able to connect with in preparing for this presentation. I think you have a great advocate within your own circles of just how to make speakers and guests feel like they belong here. So thank you so much, Bob. It's been great. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself, especially since I have a little bit more time than I thought I would. Right? Okay. While I could talk about LA for probably 2 hours, and I think that's the average length of our whole Immigration 101 class, I'm not going to do that because we have service starting soon, and I haven't, I'm not a morning person. So yes, I was born in South Korea. My family immigrated in 1992. It was myself, my parents, and my brother. We loved the change. It was very different. As a 6-year-old, it's very exciting to go to a new place. That excitement died away after about 2 or 3 days when I realized that everything is different here and no one knows what's going on. That So when you're being 6 years old and feeling that, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to attach myself to my parents and not let go for a while. So my parents went through a pretty interesting journey of immigration, and that has deeply affected me. They initially came over on a student visa. It was intended to be a 2-year thing. It got extended to 3 years to finish off an MDiv, and in the process, I think they made the decision to try and stay in the United States and find work at a church. New Brunswick is an RCA seminary. It's my favorite RCA seminary. I know where I live. Okay, I grew up on that campus. I grew up as being a 6, 7, 8-year-old on that campus. I know every inch of it. It was so awesome. And then at the time, there were I think at least a half a dozen other Korean pastors to be, and their children. We all just kind of grew up together on that campus. Kind of strange, right next to Rutgers, downtown New Brunswick, and here's just a bunch of Korean kids running around, drawing on chalk on the sidewalk. It was really lovely. We had some troubles with the immigration process. The RCA at the time was trying to find pastors for its churches in New Jersey, several of which had become Korean churches. I think for the right reasons, they wanted Korean pastors who spoke Korean, who understood Korean culture to be able to do that ministerial work, and there just weren't that many Korean American pastors available because they were already installed at churches. So my father was offered a sponsored visa from the RCA, and that was his work-based, employment-based immigration pathway to a green card. That is a really rare thing that happens. So I like to just make a point, anytime I'm speaking with a group that is in any way connected to the RCA, to say thank you, because the denomination is in large part why myself and my family were able to settle in the United States, to have the support of not just the church, but the denomination saying we believe in this kind of diversity in our midst, and we're willing to go through the arduous steps to figure out what sponsorship looks like. So I'm extremely grateful. I love that I get to live in Holland now because it's definitely still my culture and what I grew up in. And yeah, I'm just extremely thankful. So thank you. I know you didn't do anything to do it, but know that there are still pretty amazing things happening. I think on our journey, there was a time where it was kind of iffy about what would happen after graduation. Generally, if you're on a student visa, you have to return to the country that you're from or make other plans, pursue additional degrees. So that was a kind of a pretty big turning point. And for me, it just meant that I was kind of on the pathway to maybe becoming an American citizen at some point. It's kind of up in the air, we weren't sure. So yeah, growing up in New Jersey, both as a son of a pastor and then also as an immigrant myself and the son of an immigrant, so all these different layers of identity. It's been very useful to me. I think the most useful thing in my own experience has been able to stand between different worlds, different existences. Am I American? Am I Korean? Am I first generation immigrant? Am I second generation? Am I American? Am I Korean American? There's all these things, and I tend to get really lost in my thoughts. So my entire life has been thinking about, pondering, what does this all mean, and why me? Why has this happened to me? So now I think I could start talking a little bit more about Lighthouse Immigrant Advocates, because when the position for the development officer at the time in 2021 came open, it was very much a, hey, so all that stuff you've been doing for your whole life, working in Community Action House and learning music and kind of being thoughtful about your experiences as an immigrant, as a citizen, as person who regularly navigates borders and migrates between different identities, here's a potential position that lets you actually use that in a really holistic way. So I was so excited to join the team. Our mission statement is bringing stability to West Michigan families and communities through immigration legal services, education, and advocacy. It's a lot of words. I like to call ourselves a nonprofit, immigration law office, and advocacy center. Nonprofit because we run almost half of our operations just solely based on donations, and that's kind of the definition of a nonprofit. You do impossible things with less budget and with the faith of the community around you. We're an immigration law office because we have 3 attorneys, 2 DOJ reps. We have a 10-person legal team that is awesome. They are so cool, and I don't know what they're talking about half the time, but they are really good at what they do. And advocacy, because for LIA, advocacy is what we do, whether we're educating or working with clients or trying to change the legislation locally or federally. And obviously, LIA is a small nonprofit office, is not going to write any bills or influence, major campaigns, but we make it a point to share the stories that we are, working on and working with legislators so that they are better informed. Whether they are sometimes receptive to it or not, we think that everyone needs the information to be informed. So we do try to keep our lawmakers locally, aware so that at least they can try to do something with it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. A little bit about our history. We started in 2015, and we had 2 staff to start. It was November 2nd, 2015 that we opened. 26 cases is what we started. There's lots of different numbers I am going to mention, but the biggest one, I think, for context of the change at LIA and how we've developed is the number of cases that we've started each year. 26 cases in that first 2 months. We started in November, went through December, so not a huge caseload, but I think it quickly ramped up from there. In 2016, we had 109 cases, our first full year. By 2016, politics had changed in the country significantly from 2015. By 2017, we held a little bit in response our first Immigrant Rights Summit. 2018, we had about 323 cases that started. So, in the course of 2 years, we tripled. We went from 100 to 300. Pretty good. I think we had about 5 staff at that time. 2018, I believe, is also the year, I don't know if he's here. Did you guys ever see the video of Pastor Gordon eating really hot peppers? Because people from this church decided that that's what they wanted. So it's if you haven't seen it, it's a short video. It's very fun. He and our founding attorney, Sarah Jorvan Oosterhout, are sitting there, and we Hope had done an amazing fundraiser and raised all this money. And so in return, the promise was, well, if we hit our goal, Pastor Gordon and Sarah will, live stream eating really hot peppers on video, and we'll answer really difficult questions about immigration and policy and how that works with faith, and it's awesome. So Hope has a long history of supporting LIA, especially when we were in our first couple early years. It means a lot because it was a small team. I think depending on the kind of nonprofit, you might think, oh, you've helped 400 people. That's not very many, but I think there were people here at Hope Church that really saw the value of that and understood more deeply what it meant to do that kind of work in the community. Slow growth throughout. There was another summit. We started Strengthen Stories. There was a variety of advocacy activities. 2020 is when the office moved to Paw Paw Drive. So I think we finished our move in December of 2020. And then we moved in to our new offices right next to Community Action House. And then pandemic started the next month or 2 months after that. So then we went fully remote for a year. So no one got to actually use the office for another 6 months. 2021 is when I started, and that's where my story really begins with LIA. But there is half a decade of existence of just doing things because they needed to be done. LIA truly, I think, exists because there is a need for immigration legal services. There's a need for education and advocacy, and that need was not being really filled or met by other organizations or institutions or people in Ottawa County. There are a number of really excellent organizations in the Kent County, Grand Rapids area. In fact, our founder actually worked with one of them for about 1.5 years before she decided to bring that model to Holland and the Ottawa County region. So these 3 pillars kind of work together, right? We do immigration direct legal services because that is the most direct need that immigrants are not seeing. But to make those work effectively, we also need a community that understands the value of those. Without seeing how difficult it is or how expensive it is or how scary it can be to approach an attorney for help with your entire life story, without understanding what the immigration process really could entail, not the fullness of it, but even just a picture of it. And then without having people who are willing to speak up about what they're seeing that is good and not good in the community. Those 3 things really need to exist for real change to happen. So that is one differentiating factor about LIA. We don't shy away from advocacy when it's directly affecting our clients or the future of our clients' abilities to experience the same rights and obligations that any other resident would. And we really try really hard to keep our education really upfront and up to date. And that's the hard part, because things change so quickly in immigration practice. So I'm going to give you a 5-minute introduction to immigration today, and you may already be familiar with so much of this, but bear with me. And this has been recently updated. The last 2 years, we've had, I think, more, as a share of the US population, more people in the United States are foreign-born immigrants than there have been since 1890. So as of last year, I believe it was 13.8% of the population, and I think last year it may have dipped down just slightly to 13.6, but those numbers go up and down. It's still January, but overall, we have not had this large of a share of the population since 1890. And in 1890, I believe it was 14.4%, so it was just about half a percentage point higher. So for better or for worse, like, immigrants have again risen to be a larger share of the population than before. In 2023, 1.1 million immigrants were awarded legal permanent residency, also known as a green card. That is a great number, and it's much higher than it has been in the past years. If you want to go back to like 2015, 16, 17, that number was like maybe a third as high as that. And it goes up and down. But what we're seeing is, like, many people are finding the legal pathways to adjust status to become a green card holder, and they're being successful with it in numbers that I'm glad that it's working. I mean, like, when you increase the capacity for our immigration agencies to do their work, when you add staff, and when you double down on, like, some of the efficiencies there, I don't know. I give USCIS a lot of shade for being bad at their jobs, but I will give them credit. They are processing some things much faster than they have been. So let's talk about Ottawa County. This has hovered between, as high as like 6.6% to 5.4% of the overall population being foreign-born. It's less than the US average. It's also less than the Michigan average. Michigan hovers around 7 to 9%. So we're a little bit lower representation in Ottawa County, but that still is equivalent to about 16,000 people. All these stats, most of these stats, are included in a link in your, maybe an email that might go out at some point. It's the Gateways for Growth packet.
It's connected to the video.
It's connected to the video, so I'll be happy to share those, but it's from a project called Gateways for Growth, and it was a really high-level study of the county performed by an outside group, consultants and demographers and experts that worked with county officials and other community members to figure out what is the impact of immigration and immigrants in our county. It was founded in part through local donations and in part through Ottawa County before the DEI office was shuttered, so it was one of the big projects that they finished before last year. So these stats are there. Based on that, I can tell you that of the immigrants, of the 16,000 immigrants in Ottawa County, 1 in 4 report being limited in English proficiency. 1 in 9 are recent arrivals, so they've arrived in the last 5 years. The opposite of that means that 8 out of 9 have been here longer than 5 years, which is, that's something it's pretty cool. 81% are between the ages of 16 and 64, so roughly working age, versus 63% of non-immigrant population being in that range, so they trend younger. 1 in 10 of all public K-12 students are immigrants of second or first generation. So that's just in our population. That's awesome. I love that. That feels like home to me. 15.9% are undocumented. So that is one number that is in the report. I have a little issue with it because they didn't quite define what undocumented means in their studies. It's probably very accurate, but I can't tell exactly. So there's immigrants here in Ottawa County, and there have been forever. And I think there will continue to be if I have anything to say about it. The challenge they face is, I think, not unique to any other place in the United States. In fact, I think what they have in Ottawa County that they don't have in many other places is a culture and a history of immigration that is friendly and welcoming and has intentionally made space generation after generation. That cannot be said for all places. So it makes me quite hopeful that Lighthouse exists because, well, we can. There are 4 different ways that an immigrant can achieve a green card or legal LPR, legal permanent residency. I regret to inform you that this is sideways. It doesn't matter because it's still very much, I was talking with my colleague here about how this still very perfectly illustrates the immigration process being completely sideways and squished. Because even if it was the right side around, you couldn't see from where you're sitting. It says, I will tell you, if you were to zoom in on the PowerPoint, you could like get really detailed into the tiny. There are 4 pathways to immigration, and this is something that I think most people don't realize. You can immigrate through basically a family process. So you have a spouse or a brother. A brother is really difficult depending on what country, but a parent or a grandparent. Direct family relations can lead to attaining a green card. So you have somebody else who already is here. So that's why I think about that 8 in 9 immigrants who have been here longer than 5 years, because there is a population, and that's quite a lot. The second way is through the diversity lottery. That is literally you meet all the requirements, you put your application in, and then 50,000 people a year get a chance at a green card. It's literally playing the lottery. Not a great way, but it exists. I think it's a concession from like the immigration and.
Any idea of the number in a year that apply? So
Can you repeat the question?
Anybody, Bob is asking any idea about the number of people that apply? Multitudes more. I don't actually know the number. I'm not an attorney. I am not an attorney, so please. But Sarah would know that. I think other people in our office would know that, but it's many times more. I believe it's, actually I could do the math, because it's something like 2.5% of people that apply every year get it. So if you do the math backwards on that, I'm not a math person. It's a lot. People will apply year after year after year, and it's not free to apply. There's fees. I mean, if you want to hire an attorney or a legal representative to represent, that's expensive. And then on top of that, if you have to pay the fees to USAS just to apply. So a very limited number each year can achieve green cards that way. The third way is humanitarian, and that is becoming a refugee. Having a special type of immigration case because you are a victim of crime or a witness to a crime that is aiding in an ongoing investigation. If you were trafficked, there are special protections for children. The fourth way is employment, so having a sponsor through a place of work or being able to invest a really, really large sum of money and being able to prove that you're going to use that funding to assist in an existing business or start a new one and create a certain number of jobs. So those are the 4 pathways: employment, family, humanitarian, and wow, anybody? Investment. No, diversity lottery. I don't even count that. I mean, yes, it does work for 50,000 people a year, but the diversity lottery is so random. And actually, a certain number of those slots are reserved for like special programs in certain cities, so it's not even the full 50,000. So that's the way that you get legal permanent residency in the United States. There are certainly countries with much more permissive immigration standards, but they are only a handful. And there are far more countries where becoming a legal permanent resident is much harder. So for better or for worse, this is actually a more permissive system in the modern day than many other countries. What green card status really gives is that within 5 years of getting green card status and continued residence in the United States, you can then apply for citizenship. And that is an almost completely unique thing in modern societies because other countries have much different requirements. But in the United States, it can be done. My family did it after 5 years of getting our green card after we adjusted status. My parents took the test. I didn't take the citizenship test because I was a minor, so they took the test, they went and did the interview, they went to the ceremony, and then I became a citizen under their work. I did nothing for it. It's such a strange thing for me to realize, like, my parents were helped by the denomination to become sponsored to work in a church, and then for my parents to have done this thing that was not easy. No one who goes through the citizenship process would describe that as an easy process. I think it's harrowing, difficult, challenging. You get a lot of anxiety. What if you say the wrong thing? What if I'm not there for the interview? Like, there's so many things that could go wrong, and you just hope they don't. And I'm like the person who just kind of walked in, and it weighs on me. Another reason that I bring this up is because I've been in a place where I'm wondering, like, why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? And for me, it's just knowing who I am, what I came from. I don't know about giving back, but man, do I have a really close understanding of the challenges and a lot of the intricacies of what immigrants go through. What better place for me right now than to try and use that knowledge to connect with people and sometimes direct service. That's happened before. It's not a good thing when the administrative staff is doing legal work, but it has happened because things have gotten really, really difficult sometimes. So, I'm a trooper. You'll find this chart online and also included in the slides. Feel free, but it is complex. Every red one is a stop sign. It's like the worst board game of all time. You start here, all right, and then it asks you a series of questions, and it's just, yes or no. Do you have, it's part of the reason that immigrants struggle to navigate the immigration system is because this is by far the clearest, least complicated way of describing how to go from being a visa holder to becoming a green card holder. And all of our legal representatives and attorneys have this taped to their desks or next to their desks on their wall because they look at it all the time because it's something that we just do. The ones that have, our attorneys, they understand the immigration side of this much more than anybody else does, and that's really helpful because, like, at any point, you are like 3 steps away from getting sorry, you can't become a green card holder. And there are things that you can answer or do incorrectly along the way that might prevent you from being eligible for 5, 10, 15, 25 years. It's one thing to intentionally violate laws and regulations. It's another to be ignorant of them because the system is so complex, almost like it's designed to prevent you from being able to do that. I'm going to just pull in my inner Sarah Jorvan Oosterhout right now, and she would say that the system really is designed to do that because of the way that we've had to negotiate through legislation our immigration laws. I actually agree with her sometimes. Like, it is so complex. I don't think it needs to be, but it is. And so it is a major barrier that many immigrants face in trying to become US citizens or become green card holders, and sometimes even just to maintain their status. So LIA does the work that we do because it's really hard. And before LIA existed in Ottawa County, you could go to the Catholic Diocese or maybe Immigrant Connection as they were just starting up in Grand Rapids. But at the time, there were several barriers. One is that there was an income limit. So if you receive federal funds, oftentimes there are very strict guidelines that nonprofits have to face. One of those for legal service organizations is if you receive federal funding, generally you cannot charge for the services that you're providing. LIA could not operate without client fees. It's part of our model. It's part of our restorative model of how we do service. Like, we expect clients to understand, one, the value of what they're getting, but also, I keep doing that, but also the fact that, like, we think that there is a fair cost that clients at any income level can be expected to pay for the level of expertise they're receiving. And our budget depends on it. So, like, yeah, so the other problem that causes is because of the income limit cutoff, immigrants that make 210% of the federal poverty level simply cannot be served at some of these organizations because they don't have the funding. The grants from the federal government will say, like, you cannot serve someone above this level. Even the organizations that don't have that strict of a grant will still require, before the first meeting with a client, to provide income verification, identity verification, address verification, all the verification things that a lot of clients don't have and they need help with to begin the process. So, like, for funding-wise, it's a challenge because there is really an unmet need of people who are working and living that need the help, that may not qualify for free programs, that are reticent to just hand over a whole bunch of documentation before they even get anything. And so, LIA, we're pretty simple. You call, get a consultation, we need your name, phone number, and we need $50. That's non-negotiable. That's our consultation fee. We do hundreds of consultations every year. We've never had an issue with the fee. I think it helps us basically navigate the schedule, but that's a much lower barrier than having to ask, what is your income? How many people are in your household size right now? We get into all of that once the consultation starts. Don't worry, like that is information we need just to fill out the most basic application for their immigration case, but that's not where we start. We start with as little information as possible during the consultation. And then, honestly, like 90% of the time is the client trying to explain like what is going on, and us trying to decipher like their version of events versus like what are you actually experiencing, and that can be very difficult. So that's consultations. We do a lot of consultations. We do, I don't know, in that first year, I think each of those 26 cases was a consultation that turned into a case. I think part of that was word got around that Sarah was starting to do this work, so everyone just found her. Since then, I don't know, I'd say like 50% of our consultations each year, 45, 55%, turn into actual cases. The other 45, 50% don't go forward. And there's a lot of reasons behind that I'll get into. Our renewal clinic is what we really started during COVID. If you have a green card, if you have a work permit, if you have certain other kinds of statuses, they need to be renewed. And if you don't renew them, you lose status and you become undocumented. Or it becomes really expensive to try and fix that on the back end after your expiration date is hit. COVID hit, we were closed in person, so was everyone else. We need to figure out a way to keep our clients, we knew when their things were expiring. So we got some pretty awesome software and developed new procedures to basically be able to do everything remotely. We kept everyone in status. It was really amazing. We got a grant from the Grand Haven Area Community Foundation to support that program, which helped kind of get us through the gap of starting that to running it. And since then, that project has continued. So we can do renewals of, I think, a half a dozen different processes, completely online or over the phone, over the mail. It's secure, and it's got like a flat fee of like $350. It's great. We have served 18 different counties in Michigan. So the word about this has gotten out to as far as Ludington and Detroit and all the counties in between where immigrants are in need of just direct access to remote services. I think the best part about this is the schedule. They don't need to be open when we're open because it's all by email and leaving voicemails. And that's awesome because our work schedules are also kind of weird. Our attorneys, they sometimes work very late at night or very early in the morning, and it can be hard to make schedules align with work schedules. So there's flexibility, which I like. Waivers and FOIAs, these are cases we take on. They're quite complex. It's essentially like if you're trying to apply for a green card and there are things in your past immigration history that would potentially bar you from being eligible, we as attorneys can do a full waiver application to explain the conditions of that and say, like, this is really forgivable under these historical precedents. And here's all the documentation. Here's everything that you need. So the client can go to their green card appointment, interview with their immigration officer. The immigration officer always asks, well, you have this thing on this date, so you're not eligible. And they pull out their giant stack of papers and go, well, I'm represented. And that actually is, it takes a lot of time because we have the burden of proof to the US government that this person does in fact meet the conditions of the waiver. Take a long time, very effortful, and very rewarding because oftentimes most people don't know that this is a possibility. And even if they do, they've been told that it might cost $25,000 for a case like that, which is a crushing number. It might be more, it might be less, but I mean, it's very expensive. And then, we hope that they're managing to find LIA and they have a good case that we can move forward with. We can take it forward. Okay, I gotta go faster. Adjustments of status are similar. It's basically when you go from being a non-legal permanent resident to becoming a permanent resident. Family petitions are, again, that family-based immigration status. And then humanitarian is asylees, refugees, and victims of violence and crime. So this is our basic legal services program overview. And I think we have just an amazing team. When it comes to having the ability to navigate some of these cases, my first 2 weeks at LIA, I spent a good chunk of time reading through all the case notes for all the cases we'd done at that time. So we have a system, and I, being curious, wanted to log in. And I started reading, and I realized after about 10 minutes that this team was carrying an immense amount of weight around with them on behalf of their clients. I never really understood until then how vulnerable you have to make yourself to be effective when engaging with an attorney for immigration. They have to know everything. Because if they don't, it's going to come up during your interview and it's going to derail your case. So there has to be an immense amount of trust to share things. I read stories of how families have been separated for years or decades. I read stories about how they had not been able to see each other for 20, 25 years because of some mistake that was made along the way. I read stories of clients who had experienced some pretty awful crimes because of their identities and were seeking safety from that, and along the way had been exposed to just terrible things. I also read stories of interactions where clients had with both law enforcement at times, but also with other law offices, or people that purported to be law offices. They'd spent the money, they'd spent the time thinking that they were getting somewhere, and it turned out that they were just being tricked by a scammer, and they had no idea until they came to our office, and we looked up their actual account on immigration and found out that you've actually been tricked. And some of the most heartbreaking ones to me are the times where we factually knew that it was actually too late, that they were probably going to be ordered, removed, deported from the country, and that there really was no recourse because of what they had actually attested to. The weight is immense. It's a regular thing each week that our team has to tell a client that based on what you're telling us and our research, you might not have any solution to the immigration thing that you're dealing with. And it breaks my heart to say this, but they actually thank us when we say that, because it's not what they've been hearing from everyone else. It's the first time they're getting the truth. And we don't like it, and they don't like it, but they are grateful because at least now they can have their identity confirmed, even though it's not the one they wanted. And those are difficult. There's also a lot of joy in the work. Approval days, usually Mondays, we get the mail from the post office, and there's a big stack of you can tell an envelope if it has a green card in it because it's thicker, right? So you can bend it and you know. And then you know when it's a rejection because it's totally flimsy. And so you get a mix of those. And the legal team communicate, they make phone calls to the clients and let them know, hey, can you come back in on Tuesday? We have your green card in the office. Sometimes they're expecting it. The ones that are more tech literate are watching their cases online like hawks, so they know already. But a lot of clients aren't, or they haven't had the time, and when we call them, it's the first time they're hearing that, actually, you know what, I never have to worry about this ever again. And there is joy. It is just very joyful. I've loved to be a fly on the wall as those calls are being made. There have been times where, especially for some of our Afghan clients, and they've been pursuing asylum claims, when we call them, it's 9 times out of 10, somehow they're with all their friends and family. I don't understand how this happens. And so when we tell them, and it's always over an interpreter, hey, interpreter, can you tell our client that their asylum case has been approved, right? And then you have to wait, and they explain it, and then you just hear shouting, it's so good. Kind of unspeakably good. And they have to come back in and pick it up, and there's more steps. So it's a praxis of extremes. There's really amazing things, and then there's really dark things. And in between, we're just trying to figure out how to be human, because the law is not human. It's, by design, supposed to be the rule of law, right? So we have to add the human element into that process, and we can choose not to, and you can be successful that way, but I think our way of wanting to operate really is based in the human side of things. Family separation, restoring rights and justice one case at a time, achieving stability, and building trust in each other. One thing that I've learned over the last couple years, and I'm going to wrap up, I promise, in just a little bit, because I know you have 10 million questions, and I love that, is overall there's been a long, I think, erosion of trust in institutions and in the public. And that's not just here in the United States. I think that's across the globe. I think as modern societies have evolved, we think, do you really want to go talk to the bank? Do you really want to go talk to an attorney? Do you really want to go into the medical system? There's a lot of erosion of that. And that is fearful to me because I think we need that. So part of our job is to represent the United States government in the best way possible. We try to present the best version of things to our clients because that's what we have to operate with. Of course, yeah, we're careful, we can be cynical, and we're dealing with certain aspects of the work, but we want and need our clients to be able to trust the government that is now it's theirs. And so I think part of our duty to clients is to ensure them that like what we're telling you is the truth, and the government will follow its own rules most of the time. Oftentimes clients are coming from countries where the rule of law is much weaker, where corruption is the standard for anything. And so there is a real rebuilding of trust both in the community. I was just thinking about passport photos. Betsy, you and I were talking about this. The idea that we might send someone to the city of Holland to get their passport photo taken. Like I've had that done once. I got lost in the building because I couldn't find it for a while, and there was no one at the front for whatever reason. And the idea of sending someone who had arrived in the United States a month ago and they want to apply for one of the dozen cases that require like 4 passport photos, like they don't know what Walgreens is. And if I try to send them to the city of Holland, they'll be like, well, I don't know if I want to go to this city. Like it's a government agency. Are they like if it's $10, do I have to bring more for a bribe or? So there's just cultural navigation that happens, and as legal representatives, there's just a duty that we do beyond just representation that that really, I think, makes me have hope. There's a lot of challenges in what we do. I talked about the wait. We are a bigger team than we were in 2023 even, so we added 2 people this past month and a half. We started at 2, 3, 4, 5. We were never, I think we're still playing catch up with our policies and as an organization realizing what it means to be a staff of 12 rather than a staff of 5 or 2, because it's a very different feeling along the way. And then the fact that the global is always local. Like I'm watching the news like a lot. I just have to because I want to know, mentally prepare for things that are going to be happening. When Ukraine was attacked by Russia, or that whole conflict happened, I knew that was going to have a direct effect here in Holland, and it did. We have clients who are the result of that conflict. Afghanistan was another big one, and then I don't know, like inter-country relations. It's hard not to think of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine right now. Like, how is that going to have a long-term effect on people here, and how does Lighthouse play a part? What can we do? Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just being ready to go. So yeah, the fact is I read the local news and I read the national news. I'm going to rush through these a little bit. Last year, this is our chart for cases per month. This is 2023. We did more cases in June and July last year than we did in all of 2021. Only a part of that is the fact that we took on like 400 Afghan clients with their asylum claims, because that really fell on 2 people, and then the rest of the 8 people have continued to do their work. We've just gotten the word out to a point where like people now know we exist, or enough people do. Usually by like October or November of each year for the last 5 or 6 years, we have a slowdown in the number of cases that we have because that's when people are kind of settling down for the summer, or yeah, so that you can always see kind of a slight downward trend. The last 2 years have not done that. They have continued just to go up. We've actually had to put the brakes on last fall because our team was overwhelmed. We were expecting to have like, hey, we can wrap up the cases that we have, and instead, we just had so many more people coming that have, I think, really good questions about who they are and what they can do in the future going forward. So this has been a big challenge. This was May of 2022. That was all the asylum claims that we started. They were all wrapped up by about August and shipped out to US government. So we met a 1-year filing deadline for all of those clients, which I'm still very proud of because holy moly. We had 16 interns, we had about 80 volunteers. We had so much help from the community to do that by a deadline. There are about 1,200 other Afghans in Michigan right now, all of the result of that same conflict. And only about 1/3 of them have their asylum claims filed. The other 800 are still waiting because the resources, they were not as organized. There were obviously 3 times as many people, but what we did here in Ottawa County and Kent County for the Afghans that arrived, they are still struggling to finish. So I'm extremely proud of that. It cost a lot, like in terms of just energy and like maybe my mental health sometimes, but it was worth it. And those folks are getting approvals for their asylum claims now every week. When they started coming in last year, and they just come in every week, and so, yeah, it's a big thing. Yeah, This is a big election year. This is a big election year. So LIA was one of the organizations that helped create the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Ottawa County back in 2016. So Sarah really advocated hard to say, like, there are things that the county isn't doing well, and we think a coalition of organizations coming together can do this. So we partnered up with LIDA and LOPE and a whole bunch of other orgs and said, like, hey, can we put up a model? We found funders, and that's how Robin Afric, the former director of that office, was hired. And she did great work. I still think that the impact of that office existing is here in our community today. When I go to BPW, I've never felt so welcome. It's kind of crazy. Like, I don't think that was the case 5 years ago. Like, there has been good work done that has improved the ability for our county and governments to communicate with diverse populations. I think we're on a more downward trend right now, but I think the effects, I don't know, it's like a glacier, you know? It takes a long time to build up, it takes a long time to go away. And in the meantime, you have change. So I don't know, I'm hopeful. I'm also mad, but I'm also hopeful. It's an election cycle, so I think the hard thing, the way that it impacts LIA is that, like, we would love to be talking more about how we can build an even more welcoming process for any immigrants that have chosen Holland as their destination, but instead we're kind of on our back foot trying to defend what we already have. I think that's the case for most of the county, where we could be making progress, but instead we're just taking a step back to make sure that nothing goes horribly off the rails as it has. So I think long term, this is an important election. LA does not advocate for any specific candidate, but we do have policies that we think are great. The rhetoric right now with the president is scary, because things are on the table regards to immigration that are genuinely really concerning. In some ways, it's even worse, possibly, than having, like, detention where family separation at the border was happening back in 2016 and 17. And the reason for that is this seems safer. I don't think it is. In terms of just closing borders or closing pathways to asylum, it really is frightening. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we are concerned. Shaping the future, I don't know. I have to stay hopeful, and I do. And I think presentations like this and just living in Holland, I see the results of what it takes to do work that includes most people instead of just one side of people. And that's where I see the best work happening. It's not just one kind of rhetoric, it's a moderation between things. And LIA continues to struggle with what it means to do that, because, for example, back in May, when Ottawa County decided it was a constitutional county, it was Second Amendment related probably. My concern was that actually immigration is not outlined in the Constitution. So if you're going to run an entire government or a country only on what's in the Constitution, immigration is not really clearly outlined at all. So, it was a thought in the back of my mind. I just think about it now, like, they could try to, justify all kinds of things again. Soft raids by ICE on schools, that happened here. Schools and homes, yeah. All right, I think now is a good time for questions, if that's okay.
Please raise your hand and be aware that we are being recorded.
Thank you.
I'm just curious why you are especially using Spanish, being fluent in Spanish, when we're not getting as many immigrants from South America or Mexico.
54% of our clients last year spoke Spanish as their first language.
Really?
Yes, our clients. So that is why.
Okay.
The other 46%, all a mix. A lot of them speak English, a lot of them don't, and then it's everything else.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for being here. I'm Cindy, and wonder if you can tell us what kind of resistance you encounter from the community as far as like pushback or just kind of giving you a hard time about the work that you do?
That's a great question. So, and this has been a while, so bear with me as I remember. My first 6 months at LIA were pretty rocky. So I believe in faith communities. I believe in churches. I grew up in one. I think that there's incredible work that could be done and incredible connection. So I made a point to reach out to probably about 30 different churches that I had never reached out to in the Holland area to see, like, hey, why aren't you connected with LIA? Man, that was an eye-opener. I got some interesting emails. People were very upfront about their opinions. And I was mostly speaking with, I think, office managers or like lay pastors maybe, but I was just kind of surprised just the level of, at best I was getting disengagement, like saying, hey, we have no interest in immigration or refugees or anything like that, so no thank you. And this was me just trying to connect with someone at the church who might be willing to talk, and they just completely shut me down. Others were far ruder than I would have ever expected, but it made me, it filled in the picture. Basically saying that, like, you know, we really don't think what you're doing is good, and please don't contact us again. So that's fine. I mean, that was eye-opening to me. I'd never had that kind of experience with a church before. I know that others have. I'd heard about it, but I was like, man, this is a weird role to be doing that in. And anybody listen to WHTC, the radio show in the mornings? Talk of the Town? Talk of the Town. So I went on Talk of the Town in 2021 after maybe 2022, to talk about like the Afghan work that we were doing, to try and explain to the community, like, why are we advocating for a whole bunch of people who don't have visas and, you know, don't really have a clear legal justification. I mean, there is one, but it's not clear at all. We got two callers as I was talking about this. One started talking about terrorism and vetting and crime and murder, and I was like, sir, you're on public radio right now. You gotta calm down. The second gentleman really kind of was angry about how the folks were being vetted, and then we got a couple angry emails after the fact. I think overall, the difficult thing in terms of pushback has been just in the media and how immigration and immigrants are portrayed. Things being way blown out of proportion, especially at the southwest border. And there is good connections between Holland communities and those in Texas and along the Rio Grande. But you don't hear about them, you hear about what's in the news. So I think, I don't know, locally, honestly, I feel good. I could feel better, but like, it's something that I still continue to be proud of. Like, there's not open hostility. I mean, I think things are not easy, but man, I've lived in far worse, less welcoming communities in my life. Yes?
I have a quick question before her, because I have to leave.
Yeah.
I'm Joyce Tusink, and the question I have is about funding for any type of people who can't afford, like the $50 or the $350. Is there any sort of way that they have funding to help with that?
So we have an emergency fund, and it is used, especially in times of dire emergency need, for when clients have a really hard deadline and they have really not the resources to come up with that money in that time. The consultation fees, we are pretty strict about that. Now, the exceptions to that really come from referrals, because honestly, it's been hard to navigate equity between folks. If we waive it for some people because they say can't pay, and then we don't, even though they may be in worse situations. So generally, for the consultation fee, we charge it. Now, if there's a referral from another organization and we have a bit more understanding of the situation, we can roll that consultation fee into the larger fee for the whole case, which we know is going to exist, or we can take it on pro bono, but then that connection has to be made. But for our clients who are our customers, yeah, that $50 fee is pretty much non-negotiable, and people have been continuing to pay it. Cases for immigration can be very expensive. We're talking, at minimum like $500 in government fees. It might go up to $2,800 per person, depending on the process and everything in between. That's a lot of money. Our office fees also can vary from $300 all the way up to like $3,000, depending on what it is. We do offer payment plans for certain kinds of processes, especially those that are tied to employment. So if a client comes in and says, like, I don't have a work permit, I want to apply for one, we're not going to charge them that day because they unless they can pay. And we do ask, but if they say, I can't pay, we have a plan where like 90 days after their work permit's approved is when their payment plan starts with us, because that logically makes sense to us. So, that kind of stuff does exist. 2 years ago, we did fundraisers to refill both our victim advocacy fund and our emergency fund because we like to keep some funds in there as they get dispersed out. I'll just tell you, we'll be doing another one of those fundraisers this year, but we didn't need to do them last year, so that was a good thing. We raised enough money to keep that fund solvent. So thank you for that question. That's great.
Hi, Jane Dickey.
Hi.
Is there any way for people who have come into work, I'm thinking of particularly people coming from Mexico, Mexican workers have come up, they've been here for a number of years undocumented. Is there any path to citizenship for them, or do they have to, or a green card, do they have to actually leave the country and then apply? I know you're not the lawyer, but...
So I can tell you that it really depends on the conditions and how they entered, how they exited, what they've been doing, so everything. Like, it can be very difficult, though, especially if there were, basically, yeah, it can be very difficult. If you violate immigration law enough times, you get what's known as a permanent bar, which means you can never enter the country legally ever again. So enough violations, and that can add up. So it really depends. I always recommend that they get in touch with someone who is more knowledgeable, like an immigration attorney. There are waivers. Waivers do exist. Those are conditional, and there's a list of like things that you can waive past. I am not knowledgeable enough to know specifics of what exactly, but one is the big one, DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That essentially is a waiver program where children who were brought to the United States by their family members and parents when they were young with no fault of their own were granted protection from deportation and removal. This was an Obama-era decision. 10 days after I started LAA, the whole program was declared unconstitutional by some judge in Texas. So all the applications we had pending for that were nullified, and we had a bunch. The clients who have already been approved, they can renew. That's what we've been doing. I don't want to be sacrilegious, but like religiously, because losing that, you can never get it back now. That's been in the courts since 2021. So I don't know. Again, this presidential administration trading politics, for various things does not look very hopeful to us right now. So we'll see.
One more question and we go to...
Norma Killalay. And I have a question directly, not for LA, but I'm interested in your take. I had seen a clip that Bethany Service had changed a particular employment policy that they would hire Christian declared only persons. And of course, Bethany Services is a large provider of services to people who come with different religions. And so I was immediately concerned how that would affect their services.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, that's a hard, man, you saved the hardest question. So in total transparency, I've been trying to reach out to my colleagues that work at Bethany Christian Services. We've been working together for a couple of years now to try and learn from them what's going on, because I don't know. I do know what's in the press releases. Basically states that as a policy, they are not going to be hiring any full-time employees that are not self-professed to be of the Christian faith. Whether or not that's legal, I think it is, but it shouldn't be, whatever. Any full-time employees they have that are not Christian, they're not getting fired. They might not want to work there anymore, that's up to them. And I know that they're probably going to still hire contractors, part-time or time-limited employees that are not Christian to fill their basic needs of translation and cultural communication. I don't love it, but I don't know what they're doing. and I need to understand. We consider them partners. We wouldn't have been able to do all the work that we did for Afghans without their deep partnership. I have friends that work at Bethany still. They still love what they do. It's challenging. Bethany is there's only 10 officially recognized resettlement agencies in the United States. Bethany is by far the largest one. They have branches all over the country. So this is a policy that affects not just Holland or Grand Rapids, but major regions of the country. So, you know, it's kind of weird to be, if I was working in Grand Rapids office, like having this policy come down and go like, what is happening right now? Because like, what was the cause for this? I think it's hard, yeah. I will be continuing to try and reach out to my friends and colleagues to figure out like their take on this, because that press release that I saw was pretty limited in details and felt pretty strange to me. So thank you for that question, though. It's something we're wrestling with.
We're out of time, and
We're out
I
of time.
want to make sure that we thank David for an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Personally, I want to thank David for the most awesome Venn diagram I think I've ever seen. I can't believe you fit it all on one piece of paper.
Let's go.
Jane's looking at me like she's going to strangle me. I know, we're out of town. But I want to alert you, there's a PDF file of slides that David had referenced earlier about the Ottawa County data. Now, if you were here last week or watched it online, you know that the data that Scott shared was really insightful, and David's is as well, and it's attached to the video of this performance. I'm going to try and get that and the PDF he sent me of this slide presentation attached to the Wednesday email next week, so watch for that, because there's really good information there. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You guys.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And I had the advantage of seeing this beforehand and was able to print this out. It is absolutely fascinating to read, I will say.
Yeah.
And take note, there are 4 places where you can end up actually getting a green card, but there are 7 little things here that say, sorry, you don't get one.
Yeah.
And there's a square here that says, do you have $500,000 or $1 million? Oh, then you can move on. Like, really? Oh, yeah. So this is it's a fascinating read. It was very helpful. Thank you, David. This was
course.
wonderful.
Thank you very
today.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support. We are so grateful to have Hope Church in our community, and let's keep doing good stuff.
Yeah, we're happy to partner. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Let you know that next week is Shakespeare Behind Bars, and we hope you join us for that. If you want more information,
Thank you,
check
Bob.
out your worship
We appreciate
bulletin,
you so much.
because that's where you
this
need
was
to be
great.
headed right now, is to worship. Thank you.